A billionaire who had everything he could ever want lived in a mansion that stretched wider than most people's entire neighborhoods. His name was Richard, and although the world saw him as a man with power, wealth, and control, he carried a quiet burden inside his heart. He was a man who trusted very little, especially after being betrayed by people he once thought loyal. Every time he hired someone, he questioned their intentions. Were they there for the paycheck, or did they truly care about the work they did? When his new maid, Angela, came to work for him, Richard immediately noticed her humility. She was a black woman who carried herself with quiet strength, and though her clothes were plain, her dignity spoke louder than any riches ever could. Angela didn't come to the mansion alone. She had a little boy named Daniel, about 7 years old, with wide, curious eyes and an innocence that made the toughest heart soften. Richard allowed the boy to stay, though reluctantly. He told himself it was temporary, but something about Angela's honesty made him accept. Weeks passed and Richard watched from the shadows. Angela was meticulous with her duties, dusting, polishing, cooking, and serving with a grace that surprised him. But it wasn't just her work ethic that stood out, it was the way she treated her son. Even when she was exhausted, Angela knelt beside Daniel, helped him with homework, or read him stories before bed. She taught him manners, discipline, and respect. Richard often caught glimpses of Daniel holding the door open for the staff or offering to help carry groceries. For a boy his age, that kind of character was rare. And yet, Richard's doubts never fully left him. He wondered if Angela was just putting on a show, hoping to secure her place in his wealthy world. He wanted to know what she and her son were truly like when no one was watching. So one night, Richard devised a test. He pretended to fall asleep on the long sofa in his grand living room, where Angela would pass by while finishing her evening chores. He lay there, his eyes shut, his breathing steady, listening for every sound. Angela quietly entered the room, Daniel trailing behind her with a book in his hand. The boy noticed Richard stretched out, apparently asleep, and tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Mama, should we wake him?" he whispered. Angela shook her head. "No, sweetheart. Let him rest. Some people carry heavy loads we can't see." Her words made Richard's chest tighten, though he kept still. Daniel placed the book down on a nearby table and glanced at Richard again. Then he surprised his mother with a question. "Mama, do you think he's lonely?" Angela paused, looking at her son with gentle eyes. "Maybe he is, baby. Sometimes people build big houses because their hearts feel empty. That's why we must always be kind, no matter who it is." Richard wanted to sit up right then and there, but he remained frozen. His test was revealing more than he ever expected. He heard Daniel whisper a small prayer, his childlike voice trembling in the stillness of the room. "God, please bless Mr. Richard. Please give him peace in his heart. And thank you for giving Mama this job so we can have food and a roof." Richard's throat went dry. He had expected to hear complaints, perhaps even a bitter comment about his strictness. Instead, he heard gratitude and compassion. A child who had so little was asking for blessings over a man who had everything. Angela then guided Daniel to pick up his book, and before leaving the room, she tucked a blanket around Richard's shoulders. She thought he was asleep, but she made sure he wouldn't get cold. "Good night, sir," she whispered softly, as though speaking to a friend rather than an employer. When the door finally shut behind them, Richard opened his eyes. For the first time in years, his heart felt heavy, not with distrust but with shame. All the tests, all the suspicion, all the walls he had built around himself seemed foolish compared to the purity he had just witnessed. The next morning, Richard could hardly look at Angela without feeling overwhelmed. During breakfast, he asked Daniel to join him at the table. The boy's face lit up, surprised to be invited to sit where only guests of honor usually dined. They ate together, and Richard asked him about school, his favorite games, and what he wanted to be when he grew up. Daniel answered with bright eyes. "I want to be someone who helps people. Like a doctor. Or maybe like Mama. She always helps people." Those words etched themselves into Richard's soul. Later that day, he called Angela into his study. She walked in nervously, unsure if something was wrong. Richard stood by the window, his voice lower than usual. "Angela," he said slowly, "I owe you an apology. Last night I pretended to be asleep. I wanted to see what you and your son would do when you thought I wasn't watching." Angela's eyes widened, a mixture of shock and discomfort flooding her face. "Sir, she began, but Richard raised his hand gently. "Don't worry. You don't have to explain. I just want you to know. I heard everything. Your kindness. Your son's prayer. The way you cared enough to cover me with a blanket." His voice cracked slightly as he spoke. "It has been a long time since anyone treated me with that kind of sincerity. Tears welled in Angela's eyes and she lowered her gaze. "We only did what was right," she whispered. Richard stepped closer, his tone firm but tender. "No, Angela. You did more than right. You reminded me of something I had forgotten, that love, respect, and gratitude are more valuable than all the wealth in the world." From that day forward, Richard's relationship with Angela and Daniel changed. He no longer saw them as just an employee and her child, but as part of his own life. He made sure Daniel had access to the best schools and resources, not out of pity, but because he wanted to invest in a boy with such a noble heart. He gave Angela a position of higher trust, ensuring she would never have to worry about stability again. But most importantly, Richard himself changed. He began to smile more, to share meals with his staff, and to open his mansion not as a fortress but as a home. The man who once doubted everyone learned, through the quiet prayer of a child and the gentle touch of a mother, that genuine hearts still existed in the world. And though he was a billionaire surrounded by luxury, it was the small act of kindness from a maid and her son that gave him the wealth he had truly been missing all along: love, trust, and a family he never expected to find.